Good morning, folks. Thanks for joining us in today's Database In-Memory Office Hours. My name is Maria Colgan, and delivering our session today is Andy Rivenes. Andy, over to you.
Great, thanks, Maria. So hello, everybody. So today I'm doing another of our Database In-Memory Office Hours sessions. I think you guys probably landed the landing page for our office hours. Don't forget that towards the bottom we have all of our previous sessions and then resources that you can use if you want to explore more about database and memory. But I thought it would be fun today to do, since it's just become available, and we get asked this a lot, and we talked about it in our other office hours sessions, the ability to run database in memory, and we talked about the base level feature if you're on 19C. But what if you don't want to try to set up an environment? What if you don't want to download a virtual box? You don't want to mess around with an existing database? Can I just try out database in memory? And now you can, because we have something we call LiveLabs, and there's now a database in memory workshop available through that. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. So I will, let's see, flip to that. We've got to have a couple of slides kind of to get us started. Hopefully everybody can see that. And my contact information, both our Twitter handles, Maria and my Twitter handles, but my email address. If you have questions, we will be recording the session. We will post it out there. And so, but if you do have questions, please feel free to ask. With that, our safe harbor statement, I leave that in there, but we don't really need it because we're talking about things that are all available currently. So this LiveLabs Database in Memory Fundamentals Workshop, fundamentals being that we kind of go through very similar to what we did in our hands-on labs, which actually are available on our resources page, but you can actually run database in memory. So starts out with the LiveLabs page, and Maria suggested I put the simple URL in, so I did that. And what that does is that gets us to, if I've got the right, hopefully I've got the right, you know what, I'm gonna just start a new page just to show you what it looks like, because I kind of got lost in all of the windows I've got up. And so basically, if you hit that URL, and again, the session's recorded, so you can go back and look at URL or just Google on Oracle LiveLabs, and you'll notice that we hit this big page, and there's actually all sorts of labs available. So we're added as a featured lab. So sometimes we show up on this page directly, and so you can just click on that and go right to the LiveLabs page. This actually is a rotating section, so if you don't see it, you can just click on View All Available Workshops, and then we'll show up under Database and Memory Fundamentals, and it'll actually be on the second page, I believe. If I could see where we were, where'd we go? There it is. So anyways, so you can get to it either way. So if we don't show up on the featured section just because it rotates, just go to the all available workshops and click on it. And so we'll do that. And it was funny because I was setting this session up, and one of the requirements to do these workshops was that you had to sign up for the free tier and do the free trial, this thing at the beginning here, and you got $300 of credits and could use get a cloud ID and then create the workshop, and so you could launch the workshop, and there's instructions in that on how to do that, and I did some slides on that. And then bless her heart, Kay Malcolm, who's been running these LiveLabs workshops or creating them for all the different Oracle technologies, added a new option where you can actually just reserve a free tenancy, and you don't have to sign up for anything as far as a trial or use your existing credits, which would be on the second option. You can just go in and reserve a tenancy, you get an email, and you can click in, and so you can kind of avoid having to commit to anything if you don't feel that you want to do that. So that makes this really, really simple. So I have a couple slides that talk about both ways to do that, but the bottom line is once you get here decide how you want to access the cloud, and then you can run the workshop. And so I'm going to flip back real quick to try I just want to explain that. I had a little bit of trouble at the beginning trying to figure out how this all worked. And so I want to make sure that that was kind of part of the point of pointing out that this is available and kind of the mechanics of how to use it. So again, I talked about that. You can go actually access it. And then the workshop requirements were originally, again, the free trial, run with credits, and then this is the new part, which I added to it, or added to the slide, just to point it out. And the reason for this is actually so that, because Database In-Memory runs pure in-memory columnar formats, we use memory out of the SGA, things we've talked about. The requirement is actually, you need a shape that gives you enough memory to be able to run Database In-Memory. And that's the whole point of these different requirements or different areas, so that you can pick that shape, and we'll talk a little bit about it. It's all documented in the LiveLab sessions that we'll go through. But you need to pick that shape, and this, on all three of these options, allow you to do that, so you can run Database In-Memory. Because you're going to run a 19.5, so 19C database. It'll have 32 gigabytes of database In-Memory available to you, and then you'll go through populating our SSB schema. And so it's actually pretty good hands-on way to see how database In-Memory works. So in addition to that, we talked about this fundamentals. Again, this will all be so you can go back and relook at, well, this is what he did, and see that, oh, these are my choices. So I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of how that worked. And then eventually you get into the workshop. So let me see if I can find my slide that gets us to the workshop. So I've already gotten in there and brought that up, I think. That's not the one I'm looking for. I'm a little discombobulated today, guys. So we'll see if we can get there. Here we go. So here's the page that you'll land on as you get ready to start the workshop. And it's actually pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy to follow through. Again, you get your choices. You're going to set up, basically you're going to set up an Oracle Cloud account or a tenancy so that you can create essentially the virtual machine to run Database In-Memory. So that's kind of the first step. And I'm just going to, let's get rid of, well, actually, we'll talk about that too. So the prereqs of getting started, and then I actually included some cloud tier signups, but I'm going to skip over that because it's pretty self-explanatory. And I suspect that most people will take the free tenancy, just start it up, reserve a tenancy, and connect. And so you won't have to do all of this, but it'll, so I'll just highlight the slides in case you need to access it. But basically you can do the free cloud tier, or you can do the free tenancy, and the tenancy is very easy to reserve. I actually went through it yesterday just to verify it. You'll get a confirmation that says you're reserved, and then you'll get an email back and directions how to connect. So you can either do free cloud and you reserve, whoops, okay, now so you can either sign up for the free cloud environment and choose that option. If you already have a cloud account with credits, you can use that, or you can reserve a free tenancy, get your email back, and connect that way. So there's 3 different ways to do this. Have I confused everybody, Maria, do you think, or is this okay?
No, I think it's good. And I like the fact that now I don't even have to, try and put in a credit card or sign up for anything, even though it's free. So using the reserved, I think, is probably going to be the way most people are going to go with this.
Yeah.
And by the way, I put the URL to the website, the LiveLabs website, in the chat for everybody. So you should be able to see it there. Don't forget, though, if you're asking questions, not in the chat, in the Q&A.
There you go. Okay, thank you. So then, and then setting up the workshop, it's basically you'll get to this cloud picture here, which I've actually got set up here. So you'll wind up on this landing page. Whoops, actually, I guess you'll land up, maybe I'm one too far in, because that's what you'll wind up with once we've created it. There we go. You'll get into the cloud page, And then if you're following along, sorry to go back and forth here, if you're following along with the directions of the workshop, so you've landed in this page here, and it's going to tell you to set up your, there we go, to set up your a cloud account, or it will land you right here if you're just doing free tenancy. But just follow the directions and I think you'll get there. I'm not trying to confuse you. I just want to make sure that you kind of understand the mechanics of it. So, and that may have wound up confusing you, but hopefully not. And then you'll pick introduction. You can watch a video. We've embedded some videos that describe kind of what we're going to do, how database in-memory works, and some of the features of the labs. So you can always take a look at those to give you some more background. As I said, Kay's done a really great job of setting up this lab to make it really easier, understandable. And I only had just a few comments that I'm going to highlight, just that I was a little bit confused about, but that's probably because I always run this, in a virtual box on my own versus using the cloud. So it's a little bit different environment, but actually pretty easy to use and go through. And if you expand these steps, there's always, for each of these labs, if you will, there's additional information and this tells you about the database in-memory architecture. Then you wind up generating an SSH key, and I guess what I'll do is maybe I'll just go through this rather than trying to flip through. I don't want to spend a terrible amount of time doing something you're already going to do, but I'll just give you what my comments were about each of these steps then. So we have the cloud sign-on where you'll begin for setting up the workshop itself. One of the things it took me a little bit to figure out was, so what you wind up with is you have an account on the cloud, but as part of the lab, you're going to wind up setting up two users, an OPC user and an Oracle user. And this is just background. You just follow the directions and it will lead you through. But I kind of had it at the beginning with a little bit of trouble figuring out what the mechanics of the architecture of the lab were. And so the OPC user is going to allow you to create the virtual machine with the Oracle database running 19.5, setting up database in memory. You're going to actually populate or import and then populate the SSB schema. So you're going to wind up at the end of all this with a fully running Oracle database, SSB schema, and access to the lab scripts, or you can just cut and paste right out of the lab instructions and run the labs. So I just had a little bit of confusion initially figuring out how all these related. And so ultimately you're going to wind up, it'll lead you through creating two different users. You're going to use an SSH key, which is why you generate an SSH key. You're going to use SSH. And then you'll SU into the Oracle user and be able to run the labs. And so I just had that there because for me, architecturally, it made it a little simpler to figure out what was going on. And with that, then you generate an SSH key again, so you can SSH into the OPC user. And then from there, you'll run all of the lab scripts to set everything else up. That's lab 1. Lab 2, setting up the compute instance. That's actually where the Oracle user gets created. It creates the database. It basically just restores a VM. And then it sets up the SSB schema and your lab scripts. So that's the setup of the compute. So those are the kind of the two prereqs to get going. In lab 3, then it goes through and you can enable in memory. You get to see the population. There's a bunch of information about what you can run to see that you've populated the SSB schema into the column store. You can do some queries to see VDollar in memory area and VDollar IM segments. So things we've talked about in past AskTOM sessions, so that you can see that the objects are fully populated. Then lab 4, you actually get to query the column store, query the line order table, and see how that works. Again, things that we do both in our AskTOM sessions and in our office hour, or our hands-on labs. And so you can walk through that. You don't even have to actually run the SQL script if you don't want to. You can just cut and paste right out of the lab browser page, which is kind of cool. And then finally, you can do some joins and aggregations. So you can see how hash joins work, see the creation of the Bloom filters that allow a hash join to be a scan and filter operation. Get to see vector group by at work. It says their group by aggregation now can use vector group by with database in-memory. You get to see key vectors and an execution plan, so you can see how fast that is. So it kind of really does allow you to walk through a real environment on the cloud, so you don't have to have anything on your machines, and see how database in-memory works. And so that's kind of, I wanted to walk through how all that worked and let people know that it existed. And then of course we have our normal resources page, where if you want, you can actually go grab one of I have a text file of the hands-on lab, and it mirrors what you'll do in this LiveLab resources page. So you can actually kind of see where you're at if you get confused, and see what's going on there, among other technical briefs and other information about database and memory. Obviously, the AskTOM Office Hours links there as well. But anyways, if you have other questions, and I usually always point this out, this is a good resource for database and memory. And I was originally going to try to do a demo, but that didn't wind up working out. I don't really want to go through all of these steps, but the one other thing that might be of interest is if you expand on Lab 2, which I will do, you'll see that you'll go through these the cloud pages, which we've got right here, and setting up your environments, and it's very well documented. And so I don't think you should have, and there's our shape that you need to make sure that you grab. The only thing I can recommend is make sure you scroll all the way through each of the labs, because I got to here and thought, oh, I'm done, but realized that there's still some further steps to run as you keep going through in order to set everything up completely. So make sure you scroll all the way through and make sure that you get your database up and validate that everything is running before you jump to the next lab. So sometimes I have trouble following the directions, and so I wanted to make sure I pointed out that everything is fully set up. I've gone through it all, and it's actually very good. So I would strongly recommend giving it a try, and make sure that you go through each of the labs in their entirety, so that you don't miss a step and then something doesn't work because you forgot to do something. Okay, so that's pretty much all I had for LiveLabs. I don't know if we have any questions or not, but hopefully that at least will help a little bit, letting you know that it exists, and that and what your options are, and setting it up and trying it out.
So thanks, Andy, for highlighting the fact that folks can do this, because oftentimes it can be hard to find resources in your own organization to be able to try out new technology like database in-memory. Right now, there are no questions in the Q&A. We did have one about the URL. So if you didn't see it in the chat, the URL to the LiveLabs is also in one of the answers to the existing questions. So if you just click on Q&A, you should be able to see it there too. But yeah, we can probably scroll back, Andy, to take a look. But in terms of what you go through in the live lab versus a hands-on lab, Andy, is it all the same content? I can pretty much follow along?
Yes, it actually has all 3 part directories that we've used in our previous open world hands-on labs, and some of my examples I do. And it goes through populating and validating the column store, then it goes through querying the line order table and kind of showing you how that works, and then the joins and aggregation. So it's something I originally set up for something internally to make sure our folks knew how this all worked, and it was so well received that it got included for the public, because it's really the same thing that we do, and so it really is the same lab. And so so if you want to, so I guess part of your question was that the files that we've made available on the resources page will walk through basically the same thing you're going to see in the labs. And one of the interesting things about the lab and the pages that you go through with the, I should just show it. Like when you go through some of these querying the column store, we always have you run the SQL scripts, and they're there. The SQL scripts are there. But the cool thing about what Kay did with this is, if I can get to one, where you can just copy the right out of the browser here and paste it into your Cloud Shell and run the query. So you don't have to do an @ and type in the script. You can literally just cut and paste the whole thing, which for me, I love, because I hate having to type because I never get it right. So, which I think is really kind of cool. So, but it's basically exactly the same stuff. Some of our, from our guide that we did, gosh, a long time ago, is same kind of text that tries to explain what you're seeing. So it's actually a very interactive way of running the lab and seeing how database in-memory works.
Fantastic. And does it cover some of the more advanced topics, things like join groups or ADO or any of those types of things that we've done in kind of longer term workshops, but not necessarily in the hands-on labs?
Yeah, I think join groups we do have in there, things like ADO, and actually that's a good idea. I think we're going to try to do some of that. But an ADO lab, we don't do some of the more advanced features only because they're kind of hard to demo in a lab, because you think about something like ADO, or in 18C we introduced AIM, automatic in-memory. They're really time-based, and so they don't, it's hard to show running that, because basically, let's see, how am I going to say this, that they run on a daily or an hourly basis, and so it's hard to show the automatic part of that. You can obviously run the manual part. So but that's actually a pretty good idea. I wonder if we should have maybe an in-memory fundamentals deep dive, or maybe a part 2 to that, which actually I could talk to Kay. Wouldn't be a bad idea, because a lot of times people don't realize how many new features are part of database in-memory that have been added in 12.2 and 18C and 19C. And there's some pretty amazing stuff, because we're really, and speaking of AIM, I'll just do a little plug, we really are working towards making all of this completely self-managing. It's completely automatic, and that's obviously automatic in memory is kind of what we're targeting there. So it's a little our plug for what we've introduced in 18C, and actually in the 20.3 pre-release, we have some new enhancements as we go forward. So yeah, that's actually a pretty good idea. I think it would wind up being a 2 or 3 hour ordeal if we tried to dump all that in the same thing, but actually maybe a part 2 would be kind of fun to do.
Yeah, like you said, more of an advanced features or advanced section of it. Awesome. With that, I actually don't have any more questions on this side, Andy, but I'm just trying to think if there's anything else we should cover to make sure people have everything they need for to be able to start taking advantage of this. And I guess if they run into or have any questions post this, they can always reach out to us either on Twitter or through social media, leave a comment on the blog. There's lots of ways to reach Andy and I if you do have questions once you start doing the lab. But as he said, it does seem like we have a very detailed workshop and guide to go along with it that should hopefully explain everything.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting question, because actually I'm on the hook to be the guru for this as far as questions during the lab. So I think there's, and I guess I should know this and I don't, there must be a way to actually, if you get stuck when you're running the lab.
I think it's there on the left. Is it see an issue? If you notice on the left-hand side under the introduction, objectives, prerequisites, there looks to be a link that says see an issue with a question mark on the page. So I'm guessing that there might be something.
There you go.
Yeah.
So there you go. Very good. Thank you. So yeah, and I'll eventually, well, not eventually, that question will then come back to me, since I volunteered to support the lab, because I think it's so nice to be able to actually just run it. and not have to have all sorts of setup. Yeah, and just that's another way. Either you actually, if you've watched this now, you have my email address, so you can certainly just email me. But if you want to just do it here, that way it'll get recorded. And if I were to be, maybe I'll be, someday if we travel again, or if I'm not available right away, certainly Kay will see that, and I can and will follow up with me to make sure that you get your questions answered. So yeah, thank you, because that's exactly what I was going to plug, was the fact that we will continue to take care of the lab. It isn't something we're just going to forget about. So.
And of course, there's a ton of other topics there too. Once you're finished doing the in-memory one, we'd of course strongly recommend that you take a look at the rest of the catalog and try some of the other labs as well. But only after you've done the in-memory one
yeah,
first.
Obviously, clearly want to do the in-memory one first. But sure, I mean, there really are a whole bunch of, and notice now we've dropped off the cycle. So these are featured workshops. We're one of them, but multi-tenant. Because now folks will be the non-container database is going away, guys. So that's going to be multi-tenant. So that's probably one that's worth. The converged database, big topic. So there's all sorts of other workshops. And actually, if I just was smart, I'd bring that up. And there's 3 pages of these workshops. They really, the folks at LiveLabs, Kay and crew, Tammy and all are really working hard to get all this available so you can really try out Oracle technology.
Yeah, awesome. And it's, great too, if you've been with using Oracle technology for a while, there may be features and functionality that you would have heard of in an earlier version, but you didn't have an opportunity to take advantage of when it first came out. There's some great labs here that would show you the benefits of doing that and being able to adopt it into your environment. So things like machine learning, spatial, and graph that were previously priced options that are now free in all editions of the Oracle database and all supported versions. You may not have, as I said, taken advantage of it because they were licensed options. Now they're available to you, and it would be great to get an opportunity to try them out and then start taking advantage of them in your environment.
Yeah, I think yes, exactly. That's kind of the point of the LiveLabs, and it is the breadth of Oracle technology is so great that there's basically amazing things you can do with Oracle database. So great. Well, if that's it, then we get to go back to a little shorter version, and that's good because hopefully people got to see that there's another way to experiment with database in-memory, and we're free for the rest of the day, I guess.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andy. And as always, all of the material that we shared with you today will be available on the AskTOM website, including the recording and the links to LiveLabs and stuff. We'll make sure that that's all made available. So thanks so much, folks.
Thank you. Thanks, Maria. I appreciate it.